Hey everybody, this is Kathleen Moss, and you're listening to A Breast Cancer Diary. My guest today is Ellyn Winters Robinson, my first international guest. She's from Waterloo, Ontario, originally from Ottawa, up in Canada, and she's the creator of the AskEllyn blog and AI tool or companion. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at Ignition Communications, and she mentors tech startups, and she's been doing so for many years. She was stage 2B and she had ductal carcinoma. Welcome, Ellyn.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Kathleen. I'm excited.
Yeah, so you and I have been partnering on the Ask Ellyn blog. I've been a
Yeah,
guest blogger. This is my first time guest blogging for anyone, and it's been such a nice
I'm
experience.
loving it. I'm loving having your voice and your sound advice as part of this thing that we're building. So, very grateful.
Aw, thanks. Thanks for being that safe place for me to enter the breast cancer world as a nutritionist. It's a scary thing. Having had, been in the breast cancer community for 2.5 years now and kind of zipping my lip about nutrition because it is such a triggering topic for people. I feel like your blog has been a really welcoming venue for me to talk about that in a careful way. I am very aware that it is full of triggers and self-blame and shame. So I'm trying to be very, very careful and sensitive and permissive in all of my nutrition advice. I know you started with writing your book, which the name of your book I love, Flat Please Hold the Shame. So that was your first foray into the breast cancer kind of public life. I was just reading your book this week and really enjoyed it. So that was your first step, and then how did everything else kind of follow after that?
It's been such a weird journey. I don't know if your followers would know or you know about something called the butterfly effect.
Mm.
It was actually sort of a concept that was developed for weather systems. Like one little weather system can kind of trigger a massive storm somewhere else. But it's a good way of describing what's happened to me, which is just this domino effect of all these sort of, one thing happens, which then leads to another. And it's just been this really crazy journey over the last 2 years, almost 3 years now. So I'm coming on my 3-year diagnosis anniversary in March.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I think where it started was, as we all do, you kind of go through this and it changes you forever. And you just want to start giving back. You just want to help that next person not have to, go through this alone. And that's really where the start of my book kind of came from. Was I actually wrote it while I was in chemotherapy because I'm a storyteller. That's what I do for a living. And so I was like thumb typing the book as I'm
Wow.
going through chemo on my phone. And I just wanted to tell a really simple story of somebody that was going through it, that was really relatable and not sad and fun and funny and kind of encouraging, so that somebody at the end of it would go, okay, there were hills and valleys and bumps along the way, but she got through it, I can get through it. And that's the feedback I've had from the book, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and then, even before I put the book out there, I ended up having this sort of chance encounter with another tech startup founder that I work with. And we weren't even talking about breast cancer, but it came up in the conversation. And then he was asking me a ton of questions. And I sent him my manuscript. And lo and behold, he used that as the basis to create AskEllyn. And so suddenly I found myself with a digital version of me who, this AI knows my story and is really smart and understands everything going on in the world. But she also, has all of my personality and experience and emotional responses. And so we launched her. That was about a year ago. She's just had her first birthday in October.
Hmm.
And she's out there now. And now, I've got companies like GE Healthcare that are quite entranced with her, and AstraZeneca. And
Mm-hmm.
I just learned in the fall that she's been selected to be part of something called the City Cancer Challenge, which is an organization out of Geneva that is delivering digital patient navigation solutions to other countries in the world, low to middle income countries. And so she's part
Wow.
of that now too. So yeah, it's just been this really crazy ride. So, it's kind of one of those, some advice I always give to a young person when I sit and mentor them is, don't get so caught in your course that sometimes you miss these other opportunities that are kind of, floating down the river toward you. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what's happened. Is like, okay, I say yes to this, and then all of a sudden it leads to something else. So yeah, it's just been a really crazy, crazy, crazy ride.
Wow. So, okay, so you did the book first and it was published. The manuscript was then used as kind of a full download to create Ask Ellyn, the robot or AI companion. And
Yep.
then you started the blog after that?
Yeah. So we launched Ask Ellyn in the fall, and I don't have any marketing dollars to put behind this at this point. This is just all very much a labor of love. So I
Mhm.
thought, what if we looked at breast cancer sort of through a lifestyle lens? So fitness and nutrition and wellness and mental health and intimacy and relationships and family and fertility. And so that's what's starting to come together, and it's really cool. I've had women from Ireland. I've had, I haven't had contributions yet from some of them, but people have reached out from South Africa. And
Wow.
so it's just really neat that I'm sort of getting these international voices that are starting to come together. And then there's folks like yourself that can be, because you have this, expertise that's really important. I'm a big health fan. I believe in, fitness and exercise and eating well. Those were all things that were really important to me before I even got diagnosed. And so, having that expertise that women can tap into, but in a, empathetic, I really get you kind of way versus this, I'm a doctor and you're a patient. And, it's just a different dynamic. It's
It
just
really
women
is.
talking to women. And I want to
Yeah.
keep it very positive and wisdom focused, because that's where so much of the good advice I was getting was coming from these other women. As I was,
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I found you when you were just launching your book. I found you on Instagram. And so I always identified you primarily as a flatty and your identity around being a flatty, which you have a beautiful body, by the way. I love the photos that you've, and I thank you for sharing something so intimate. But yeah, getting to know your blog, I see that you are really trying to be a lot more of a generalist in terms of your outreach and the material that you're putting out on your blog. You're not exclusive in terms of your identity as a flatty, but just really trying to support women.
when it comes to, breast mound reconstruction or any kind of reconstruction, because I consider, being flat a chest wall reconstruction. I've always said I want flat to be a option, and I want it to be presented as an option, because so many women are, I was completely unaware that that was even a third choice. And it was a girlfriend of mine who told me about it.
Hmm.
And so I would like to see that changed. But, at the end of the day, I want any woman going through this, it's hard enough to go through this, but I want them to feel really good and comfortable about whatever decision they make. So I always say, you do you. If you want to have, implants and go that reconstruction route, I know lots of women who've gone in that route and are very happy, and then some that aren't. And then I also know, women who've gone flat. Obviously, it's a big, happy community out there. And then there's also women who've had deep flap surgery as well and are very, very happy with that. So I'm just like, no judgment here. I will support you. And so I definitely want to incorporate those voices, those options into the narrative of the blog. Yeah, so it's not just about being flat. I'm really happy that I made the decision I made. I was just watching the home edit woman, Clea Shearer, who's now having her eighth surgery and is probably going to have a ninth on her journey toward breast reconstruction. And I'm just like, I just wanted, that was my reason. I just wanted to get on with my life. I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to be strident or anything else. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just didn't want to sign up for tons of surgeries. So kind of,
Yeah.
found, and then the photos that I took, that was just me kind of trying to come to terms with who I was at that moment.
Hmm.
My body looked different. I was bald, and I just felt the need to kind of capture that place in my life, so that I wouldn't forget it. And yeah, I love those images. I love them.
So when you said in the title of your book, which I think is so clever, hold the shame, it is such a powerful statement. Is that in reference, when you think about your own story, is that in reference to your experience with your medical practitioners at all, or the social community? Where did the shame come from in your story?
It was really an observation, I think, more than anything. I was pretty comfortable with the idea of going flat. I was pretty firm in my decision and was pleased when my surgeon, like when I took my bandages off and I saw my scars. I was never really in love with my boobs, quite honestly. I was a decaf before. Even if I had had reconstruction, I probably would have gone a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably more ashamed of myself and more hard on myself before I had breast cancer. But then as I went through this, I started seeing that women that were going through the breast cancer journey were encouraged to be ashamed of themselves. It's almost like the dialogue is, oh, you've had a mastectomy, well, don't talk about it and hide it away. Or you've decided to go flat, well, that's like you're now disfigured, so let's, hide that. And that bothered me to no end. And then I see so many women expressing shame or being blamed or shamed for their decisions. I fight against my own sort of currents, which kind of might pull me back into sort of those feelings and say, no, 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 I owe it to the world to kind of be a lot more public and, within my own sort of comfort zone. But it's important to me that I'm not ashamed and that I not, kind of encourage that behavior anymore. So that's really where it came from was, you know what, we should not be ashamed of any of the choices that we make as women, and we should never be ashamed of ourselves in any form, right? So
Yeah, definitely. I remember reading that your surgeon was concerned about your husband's opinion of what you were deciding to do in surgery.
it was a fairly light comment. I think that's even more so. I mean, there are surgeons that explicitly turn away from the woman, the patient, and ask the man's opinion. And that wouldn't have flown very well. Um, and I was pretty, in no uncertain terms, made sure it was communicated to my husband that this was my body and my decision, and that he didn't, if he supported me, then he would support me, sort of thing. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I think my surgeon was like, he was just a little taken aback, I think, when I proposed the idea of going flat. And I remember him sort of saying right at the outset, because I had like shed 10 pounds out of stress and, was looking pretty lean. And I remember him saying I would look spectacular with implants. And it was just a guy thing. But you know what, in the long run, he was actually really, really good to deal with and was very, very supportive and understanding of my decision. And I think helped both my husband and I kind of navigate our way, just through this whole change. My husband's not a guy who he's not a guy who deals with change well at in any form. Like going on a holiday it freaks him out. Like he doesn't like change, and so having to deal with the woman that he's lived with and slept alongside for 30 years look different. It's been a really challenging thing for him, and he's continues to work on it. So it's just, yeah, it's a lot, and then you add into that just the fear and the emotional response of, I was never supposed to get sick. Like, that's not supposed to happen in the family. I don't think there's nearly enough supports for the guys out there, which is also why I wrote the book. Like, I love to hear when women who've read it go, I've just given it to my husband to read.
Yeah.
That makes me feel really happy because the guys are really lost, and they, we find each other, but they won't talk to anybody. So, that makes me so happy.
Yeah. I'm glad that you included your husband in your story. I've written my story down. I don't know yet if I'll publish it or if I'll just hand it down to my nieces and my own folk, but I was really reluctant to talk about my husband because it was such a tender time for him, it was a time of such emotional vulnerability. I really appreciated your including your husband's response, especially you talked about his response to your first photo shoot after you went flat, and that he really struggled with the fact that there were some very physical objects in the world, out there that could be spread
Yeah.
around about you, and that was a very private thing to him for your body to be photographed in this intimate way without, a top on.
Yeah, he knew I was doing the photo shoot. Um, I don't know if he quite knew that how, raw it would be. But I think where it got a little where he got mad at me was when he found out that the photos ended up in People magazine.
Whoa, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Okay, so what was his
Yeah,
response?
he got pretty mad. Anyways, he got over it. He got over it. I argue. I'm like, look, I'm topless in People magazine. I'm like, I don't have a top. Anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's been interesting as I've kind of gone through this and I've gotten out there, and it's interesting when you'll be out somewhere and somebody will come up to you and they're just like, I want to thank you so much, or you made a real difference, or whatever. And if he's present for that, it's like all of a sudden he kind of sees it from the outside in, and I think it's a little easier for him once he kind of, and his initial reaction is just to kind of lose his nut a little bit about it. I mean, but he eventually kind of comes around and realizes where I'm coming from with this. It's just hard.
Yeah.
It's just not his nature. He's an incredibly private person.
Hmm.
But again, it makes me so determined when I do get women saying thank you so much for being open, and or I made my decision to go flat because I saw you and you inspired me. That, I mean, as I say, you do you, but if I can help somebody along on that journey, then that's really cool. Yeah, I just got really lucky. My surgeon did an extraordinary job with my incisions. I am so perfectly flat. There's not a
Yeah.
dimple or a buckle or anything, and so
No.
I really drew the lucky card.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really impressed. So those photos in your first shoot when you were totally bald,
Hmm.
how far out from surgery were you?
Uh, a month and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my
Even your
surgery was done.
incisions looked beautiful.
Yeah, my
Wow.
surgery was done on May 31st, and those photos were done mid August. Yeah.
Yeah, that surgeon is an artist.
Yeah,
That's
his wife is a
amazing.
plastic surgeon. He's a general surgeon too, but
Oh,
his wife is a
really?
plastic surgeon, and I think he studied under her. And yeah,
So you
so,
only
and
had
here
one
in Canada,
surgeon.
you don't. Yeah, only one. Here in Canada, of course, you don't. It's not like in the U.S. where it's privatized and you can kind of shop your things around a little bit and kind of, you kind of are just assigned a surgeon.
Right? Okay.
And in here in the Waterloo region where I live, it's a smaller community, just about 50 miles outside of Toronto, and so obviously our healthcare, our hospital system is much smaller, and I think there's maybe three surgeons who do breast surgery here in town, and so
Okay.
yeah, there's not that many. And one of them just recently went on maternity leave, so there's even less. So yeah,
Okay. And you said
yeah.
that you had chest wall reconstruction. So does that mean that your surgeon took some of your extra skin and used it for padding in your hollow spot?
No, I didn't even
No.
have hollow spots. I guess
Okay.
that's just, I've always worked out, so I've got some good, nicely formed
Pecs.
torals.
Yeah.
And yeah, he didn't have to do any fat grafting or anything like that. It was just, he used stitching, like the stitching he used was oncoplastic, so
Okay.
plastic surgery type stitching. So
Yeah.
it was all folded under. He didn't use any staples, like, yeah, and and the other neat thing is I had surgery at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was home here in the house by 7:30 in the evening. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so he did a nice job, and he did it fast because I was out of
Yeah.
surgery by 4:30.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's true
Yeah,
of me too with my Goldilocks. People think that Goldilocks is more involved, but it's maybe an hour more total in the OR. It's
Yeah.
not that much more
Yeah.
involved. Oh, good for you, Ellyn. I'm for our viewers on YouTube, I will definitely get some photos of you to put up so that people can see just how beautiful your incisions were, even just, oh my goodness, less than 2 months out of surgery. That's crazy. I can't
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 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 He did a really good job. Just did a flat fashion show with the Flat Out Love folk down in New York.
Hmm.
And my daughter went with me, and I ended up sort of pulling an outfit, or I was assigned an outfit that was actually covered up. I wasn't topless. I would have been fine with going topless in the fashion show if that had happened, but it made my daughter a little more comfortable that I was covered up. And so, I try not to be, so extreme that I make my family upset about it. So it's kind of a fine line between, you know,
Yeah, well, I feel like for me, it's a part of my healing. And so I have to get it out of my system or into my system, however you look at it.
yep, yep.
And it's a season. I don't think I'll be healing forever from this trauma, but for now, it's a part of my self expression, my new identity, my body love, my self acceptance.
Yeah, and your images are equally beautiful, and that's exactly how I feel. It is a healing thing, and I don't know about you, but I'm you know not quite 2 years out from my surgery, and it's interesting now. Like I look at myself in the mirror, and maybe my husband looks at me and sees me differently, but I don't even notice anymore. Like it is amazing how it just becomes sort of part of your physical being, and you get to a place like the body acceptance actually for me came quite quickly.
Good.
Um, yeah, it was just more the trauma of going through this.
Yeah.
I think it's more, it's some of the other physical side effects that I've been struggling with, just gut healing and emotional healing and that trying to compartmentalize. We've already had the shoe drop once and we just sort of are waiting for it to happen again. And you get into this community and unfortunately people do get sick and die,
Yeah.
and that's anytime that happens and it's someone that that's also hard, you know,
Yeah.
just feels so unfair.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about your daughter. Tell me about how her response was initially to your diagnosis.
So, yeah, so she was 23, 22. She's a 2000 baby, so she just turned 24. So she was 22 when I was diagnosed. And, I think, you know, um, she was living, she wasn't living at home at the time. She was in college and she was in Toronto. And she had just shortly after I was diagnosed, she fell in love for the first time and she had a boyfriend. So she wasn't home a lot. When I first told her, she shared with me afterward, she, went for a big walk with her roommate and just had a massive cry because I think the first instinct was, well, this isn't happening, you know. My mom doesn't have cancer, or she was so convinced that it was going to be fine when I told her
Mm.
I'd found the lump, and then when I told her it was actually cancer, and I remember her asking me, she said, "Are you going to lose your hair?" Because 22-year-olds, it's all about the hair.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, I probably am," and it wasn't until a year later, and she had moved back home, and she and I were sitting talking, and she said, "I was really angry with you."
Hmm.
And I think my husband was too. And I said, "That's interesting." I said, "Tell me more. Like, why would you be angry? Like, the lady that has breast cancer, why am I the subject of anger?" And she just said, "Because you're not supposed to be the one that's weak here. Like, you're not supposed to be the one that's sick. You're mom." And what I do find in my family is, I said we're like a teeter totter. So when I'm up, everybody's up. When I'm down, everybody's down. We don't balance each other out very well.
Huh.
And so the whole mobile kind of went wonky when I fell apart, and she just said, like, "Pull it together, mom." Like, she just couldn't understand why I couldn't kind of get it together. I just don't think really anybody that hasn't had cancer can really appreciate the immensity of the emotions and the fear
Mm.
that you feel. Like, so yeah, so I thought it was really courageous of her to share that with me, and she said she really thought a lot about it, And she said, you know what, I understand now that I was angry at the circumstance and angry at the fact you got cancer, not at you. But
Yeah.
that wasn't how it kind of computed at the time.
So had she not seen you in a position of weakness like that before?
No, not
Okay.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the rudder of the ship around here.
Hmm.
And she had a really hard time with me when I lost my hair. She had a really hard time. She couldn't see me bald. I had 5 wigs, and so I used to wear the wigs around her. And I remember her boyfriend at the time was a very tall guy. He's like 6'5". And I remember being in the front hall one time and he wanted to see, and she didn't want to see, so he stood in front of me
Hmm.
so that he kind of shielded her. And then I took my hat or wig off at the time so that he could see my bald head. But yeah, she didn't want to see it. So
I remember that you shared the progression of your hair growing out on Instagram. And you were always just really candid and real about it, just the awkwardness of the different stages. And I really appreciated that.
yeah, I think it's kind of, I still do it. I still do, who wore it better. I think I'm going through, or I just had it trimmed, so it's a little shorter now. But I was going through the 1970s rock star phase. I mean, literally, I could take a picture of myself compared to like Robert Plant and performance,
Yeah.
and it was like the identical haircut. So I kind of, those are the things that I searched for. Like when I was going to lose my hair, I was like, well, what does it look like, and what does it grow back like? And everybody's thinking these questions and the different
Mm.
stages of regrowth and how to style it at different stages and everything else. And of course, mine's come in very, very curly, so that's kind of a different thing too. So I just, if I can present that in a real way and a kind of a human way, and
Mm.
yeah. So I'm always perpetually snapping pictures of myself just out of bed that's like standing up on end and all kinds of crazy things. But yeah,
Yeah.
if I can make people smile, that's always a good thing too.
Yeah, you do. You're good at that. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your son. You said in the book that your son was really brave and kind of asked you to assess the severity of your situation and
Mm-hmm.
tell him just how bad it was. And
Yeah.
tell us that story.
Again, both the kids were they're very different people. And my son is a very introverted, very cerebral kind of guy.
Mm.
And so with him, it was the same thing. He was like, I think it was, kind of them working through this place of disbelief. I remember when we went for this walk, there's a country inn not far from where we live, and it was early spring, so it was still kind of snowy. And he has a dog, and we took our 2 dogs and went for a walk together. And I remember him saying, like, well, maybe it's not, like that was kind of the sort of the bargaining thing, right? And then there were little milestones along the way. So they have a little, well, he's now 2, so I have a little grandson who was born the night before I finished chemo.
Wow.
And so I remember, my last trip to the chemo suite and being like super proud and showing these little, brand new newborn pictures on my
Mm.
phone. And I have a photo of he and I at Christmas time that year, and I'm holding him, and we're both bald. And it's a
Mm.
picture that at some point he's going to understand, and I'll be able to explain to him, what was going on in that photo. So, um, yeah, so it's been kind of a really interesting part of the journey, like finding out that they were pregnant and I had just found my lump. And so that whole sort of journey kind of having the grandbaby and them becoming parents is kind of really paralleled.
Well, I want to wrap up just by talking about the blog and some of your favorite entries and some of the authors that you've had come on and what they've had to say.
So there's one, she's also a functional health practitioner,
Oh.
also a Flatty, and she reached out. And she wrote a piece on sex and intimacy, which is such a big thing, which nobody talked to me about it. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
it's really poorly discussed and communicated what's going to happen to your body. And there's, as women are diagnosed at a younger and younger age, it's just such a relevant topic.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman that I know who was reading the blog reached out to me on Instagram, and I shared this feedback with the lady who wrote it, but Tracy. But she said, I want to thank you for that piece, that I felt seen for the first time. And I thought, wow. And then I've had women want to share their stories. So we had one young lady out of the DC area who was pregnant when she was diagnosed with breast cancer and having to go through, I mean, just imagine, being scared out of your mind for yourself, let alone your unborn child, and having to go through that experience. And then another young lady, she had several losses of, in her fertility journey, and
Yeah.
has a child now and is awaiting the birth of a surrogate. So, just those are very real. Those are not my experiences because I'm almost 60. So, having those, stories and being able to, and I think it's cathartic for them. It's really, I just love it. I just love, and I would, I just invite anybody that wants to share their stories or is again their wisdom and sort of looking at it again through all these different lenses. The work you're doing around nutrition is so important. It's kind of taking on a little bit, and I love that I'm getting global response. It's really cool. One of my favorite things to do is I can see on my my analytics now. I can see so where in the world people are accessing this website, and it's all just organic at this point. But yeah, I've got like people in Australia and Iceland, and yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that I can help get the word out that you are willing to partner with folks, even folks that are not professionals, but who just want to share their insight.
That's always an option that's available, and I always am there as an editor for people. So I just like, just get your raw ideas down, send me a voice transcript. I'll turn it into a transcript, and the important thing is that people shouldn't feel that their ability to write or not write, it shouldn't be a barrier to them.
Awesome. Yeah, you've got all the technical skills to make things work that way. So that's great. Well, yeah, I'm so glad to help you get the word out about that. And I know you have a lot of stories to share that you have shared on other podcasts about your AI tool. And I will definitely link to those podcast interviews in the show notes so that folks can learn that story. I know you've already talked about it a lot with other podcast hosts and other venues, but that's a fascinating story that just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing to know about Ask Ellyn, who's, she's sort of part of this blog and part of the website and everything else, is, really the thing is that people need to know is she's non-medical, so she's really there to be that friend, to hold your hand at 2 o'clock in the morning. She's always going to be gracious and kind in her responses. She is me. Like, you could ask her a question and me a question, and the answers are almost going to be identical because she really truly was recreated out of sort of my brain. And she's private, so we don't ask for registration or collect any data at all. I have no idea who's talking to her at any point, unless somebody raises their hand and tells me that they're using her. And the reason for that is that we wanted it to be something that was just a really safe space where I always say she's like the Catholic confessional, except there's no priest on the other side of the wall. You can say anything to her. You can rage at her. You can ask her the most inappropriate things you want. She's not there for just the patient, but she's there for those family members, for the friends who are like, what do I say? What do I do? How do I behave? Coworkers. And then she will always be free. So that was an agreement that I made with the team that built her for me, the technical team, was that we would never, ever want to charge someone to use her. So it's not like for $9.99 you're going to get to talk to my bot. That's just not going to happen. So I'll find other ways to, support what we're doing, whether it's through sponsorships or donations.
And for folks who are as far out of the AI realm as I am, just the basic question is she an audible spoken interaction
Not
or is it a
yet.
written?
Written at this point, it's text-based at this point. Could she be? Does the technology exist to be voice? Yes. We just haven't had anybody, demand it yet. But yeah, the technology is there. So it would be very strange because it could be my voice
Right, it should
speaking
be.
every language, like Nigerian dialects and Bulgarian, and like it's going to be. And I remember telling my husband that, and I said, you know what? I said, if I die, you can go talk to me. And he's like, I am unplugging that thing because he's had enough talking to me for 30 years. So he was kidding, by
That's
the way.
great. Yeah. Aw. Well, thanks, Ellyn. Thanks for bringing your sense of humor and levity to our community. I really appreciate it.
My great pleasure. It's life's hard enough. I've always looked at things through the glass half full lens,
Mm,
and so even with breast cancer, I don't know what you, but like I mean, obviously it was like absolutely devastating. The first 4 weeks that I was diagnosed, I was just like a mess. But now I actually look back on it with a great deal of gratitude.
mm.
Like, yeah, I'm still processing stuff, but it's brought the most incredible people into my world and the most
Right.
incredible experiences.
Well, thanks for taking time to meet with me and my listeners today. We will put some shots up on the YouTube version and on my Instagram at a breast cancer diary. What are your handles on Instagram? And
It's called At Flat Please, so you can follow me there. And it's a really active and engaged community. And then I'm Ellyn Jane One is my other handle. I'm also on LinkedIn if people want to connect with me professionally as well. So or if anybody needs a marketer, I'm out there.
what is the website for Ask Ellyn?
It's Ask Ellyn. So Ellyn is spelled Ellyn.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks my parents. So it's AskEllyn.ai. And there's tons of information up there, and it's only going to continue to grow. So
And that's the blog too. That's the same web address for the blog. Okay.
yeah, you can get the chat, like when you go to the website. The idea is to kind of bring it all together. I'm starting to do speaking engagements as well, and then the book you can access to purchase the book on Amazon. You can purchase it from the website as well. So
Okay. Well, thanks for all of your contributions to our community. We really need it.